night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Greetings and welcome back. On July 5th, 1852, 173 years ago, Frederick Douglass delivered the keynote address at an Independence Day celebration at Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York. The address was entitled, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" I find this address to be incredibly clear, prophetic, and relevant to this day, and I want to spend time today talking about it. Why is that? Well, let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. Before we get into the meat of today's discussion, let's take a look at some of today's headlines. The Republican-led House voted on the final passage of Donald Trump's massive tax and immigration bill, and it has, in fact, passed the House. In an effort to delay the vote, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat from New York, spoke for nearly 8 hours and 44 minutes, breaking a record for the longest House floor speech, which is good, but the bill still passed. There's some, incredibly troubling details here. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, estimates that the bill will increase the deficit by nearly $3.3 billion from 2025 to 2034, a nearly $1 trillion increase over what had been sent to the Senate by the House. The CBO also found that almost 11.8 million more Americans will become uninsured by 2034, as the bill has now become law. And the Republicans will tell you that there's nothing in the bill that takes away people's health care coverage. Here are a couple of things to understand. One is, by changing the requirements to receive assistance, you impact a person's ability to get assistance. And it's also important to understand that a lot of the changes to Medicaid won't take place until after the midterm elections. That way, those that voted for the bill that are running for re-election will be able to say to their constituents, look at your bill, look at your coverage. It hasn't changed. Well, it may not change tomorrow, but check out after the midterm elections what happens to a lot of eligibility and the requirements for coverage. So I repeat again, if you change the eligibility requirements, you are changing the program. It's just that simple. This boondoggle also contains a $150 billion boost to the Department of Defense. And so they're lowering taxes, increasing defense spending. They're talking about, again, work requirements for recipients of Medicaid. And for many, they're making work requirements necessary in order to receive Medicaid. One question is, where are the jobs going to come from? They're not providing increased training. They're not making it easier for people to get training. They're not making it easier for people to go to school. So where are the jobs that you're requiring people to have in order to receive support? Where are those jobs going to come from? They're telling us that the bill's going to expand the economy. Folks, that lie has been told time after time after time. It's been proven time after time after time to be a failed strategy. We talked yesterday with Dr. Tawhid about trickle-down economics, what George H.W. Bush called voodoo economics. They continue to tell you the same lie, and we continue to get the same results. Rural hospitals are going to close as these cuts to Medicaid take effect. Rural hospitals are going to close. Those of us, or those of you that have employer paid health care, your rates are going to increase because, again, as we discussed yesterday, just because you cut Medicaid assistance doesn't mean people are going to stop getting sick. It doesn't mean that women won't continue to have babies. It doesn't mean that people won't continue to have catastrophic events in their life. People are going to still get cancer. People are still going to be hit by cars. All kinds of unfortunate health circumstances are going to impact the lives of people without coverage. And those people are going to go to hospital emergency rooms in seek of care. And hospitals will provide them care. And then where is the money going to come from to pay for that? Folks, this is a mess. This is a real mess. So, there's a report that estimates that the United States used $1.25 billion worth of THAAD interceptors to defend Israel from Iranian missiles. A report from the Israeli newspaper Haaretz estimates that the U.S. used 93 interceptors from its THAAD missile defense system to defend Israel from Iranian missiles during the 12-day U.S. war against Iran. These things cost $13 million per interceptor. That means the U.S. launched an estimated $1.25 billion worth of these munitions. And they also used, Israel also used its Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 interceptors. and that cost about $1.5 billion. And they didn't work as advertised. Iran's president signs law suspending cooperation with the IAEA in response to U.S.-Israeli airstrikes. Tehran also cited the recent IAEA resolution as a reason to suspend cooperation, saying it was used as an excuse for Israel to launch the war. And this won't be good long term. It's very important for people to understand that prior to this latest attack, Iran was in compliance with the requirements of the protocols until Donald Trump took us out of following the protocols. And once that happened, then you were relying on the generosity and graciousness, if there is such a word, of Iran to adhere to the requirements. And one really has to ask, particularly as Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to come to the White House on Monday, what's the upside here? What has the world gained from Israel and the United States attacking Iran and engaging in this 12-day boondoggle or fiasco? Are we any safer? No. They'll tell you, oh, well, we destroyed Iran's military nuclear program. It didn't exist in the first place. So they wasted all this money, killed all these people. They've made the relationship between the countries worse, moved us closer to catastrophic conflict in the region. Where's the upside? I don't see any. And finally, Israeli pilots dumped unused bombs over Gaza during the Israeli strikes. Israeli officials described the move as a resource-saving measure, but the results was an intensifying bombing of Gaza by jets returning from unrelated missions. Israeli fighter pilots returning from their air defense missions during this 12-day war with Iran were routinely authorized to unload their leftover munitions on the Gaza Strip. This is from a paper called Maariv, M-A-A-R-I-V. The move, initially a pilot-led initiative to allegedly assist Israeli ground forces in Khan Yunis in northern Gaza, was expanded by the Israeli Air Force commander Tomer Bar into a daily operational policy across all squadrons. Folks, just when you think that the atrocities cannot get any worse, just when you think things can't get any worse, they find a way to escalate them. And again, it has been reported that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will come to the White House on Monday. I'm at a loss on that one. I'm totally, honestly at a loss for that one. So let's get to the point at hand. On July 5th, what will be this coming Saturday, in 1852, 173 years ago, Frederick Douglass delivered the keynote address at an Independence Day celebration at Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York. And the address was entitled, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" I find this address to have been so clear, incredibly prophetic and relevant to this day that I wanted to spend a little part of today discussing this, especially as a lot of us celebrated Juneteenth, and there has been a growing interest across the country in celebrating Juneteenth. And in my humble opinion, for as significant as Juneteenth was, that we also need to pay very, very, very close attention. We need to focus on this July 5th address by Frederick Douglass. It makes, I think when you take a step back and you understand Frederick Douglass's history, and then you read the speech, the context is as significant as the text itself. He says, quote, "The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude." So when you read this speech, you first have to understand that Frederick Douglass is not speaking from some theoretical ideological construct. He is speaking to the audience based upon his personal experience. And so within that context, I think it's incredibly important, and that context makes his comments that much more powerful and that much more significant. And his speech was an incredibly scathing speech. He stated, "This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn." When I first read that, it brought to mind Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, where King states, "But 100 years later, after Lincoln, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of an American society and finds himself an exile in his own land." And one of the first things that jumps out at me is how quickly Douglass goes to othering. I call othering, because he's clear from the very top of the speech. He says, "The 4th of July is the birthday of your national independence and your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the clay and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old." And here we are today. Here we find ourselves today, 173 years after he says that. And for us as African Americans, as Native Americans, as other people of color, as Palestinians, for example, we're still considered as other, we're still treated as other. His observation 173 years ago is still relevant today. And that whole idea of this is your national independence, your political freedom, that again is still relevant today. He says that this marks another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic is now 76 years old. And I thought this was really insightful for him to say. He says, I'm glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good age for a man, is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. 80 years and 10 is the allotted time for individual men, but nations number their years by thousands. And we still have that problem today. As you sit back and look at the conflict that's taking place with Iran, there are so many people in the United States that don't understand the thought process of the supreme leader, the thought process of the Iranian president. A lot of people in this country don't understand the thought process of Hamas because we can't understand their culture. The United States has a propensity to think in very short terms. It has the propensity to think only in the immediate result. We don't play the long game very well. When you look at President Putin of Russia, when you look at President Xi Jinping of China, and you listen to what they say and how they say it. You know, China is dealing as a culture that's thousands of years old. They have an incredible amount of history to reflect upon. And the United States can barely make 250 years. So for Frederick Douglass to say at the time what was the 76th year of the country, your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. And then look at this also in the context of, for as young as the United States still is, it's a crumbling empire. It had a great run, particularly after World War II. It's had a great run. But now with the rise of BRICS and other challenges that are facing the country, one has to wonder, how long will the ride continue? Because as we talk about on this show, the geopolitical dynamics are shifting greatly, shifting dramatically, and shifting quickly. He says, according to this fact, you are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. And the analogy to me there is, children dealing with their parents or children dealing with their grandparents. And the youngsters think they know it all because they understand the internet, for example. I remember when my dad was alive, I used to have to help him turn the stereo on and thought I was so much smarter than my father. But what I found is the older I got, the smarter my father seemed to become. Frederick Douglass was incredibly prophetic in that observation. Kevin Baptiste, thank you very much for that $5 super sticker. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Frederick Douglass. There you go. Thank you, Kevin. Great quote. And spot on. Spot on. Even when you listen to the so-called analysis by the Republicans of this tax bill. False to the past. Because trickle-down economics doesn't work. False to the present. And they're using this to carry us into the future, and they're lying to the American people about the so-called benefits that are going to come to them or that they're going to realize as this thing gets implemented, now that it has been passed. Peggy Parks Miller, Dr. Leon, we are ancient people. We have never been annihilated, and we will never be. These people who were trapped behind the ice once they escaped have always been a short-sighted mutation. Great observation. We are an ancient people, Peggy, but let me ask you something. Are we operating in that context as an African-American community? Are we operating in that context? Are we, as African Americans, adhering to the traditions, the teachings, the understandings of our ancestors? Or have too many of us bought into this false construct? Have too many of us bought into this false construct, and we're looking for an outcome that will never be realized? Because this might be a bit far afield, but in terms of false constructs and culture, we look at other cultures that come to this country and how quickly many of them, not all, of course, but many of them are able to make progress. And then we scratch our head saying, well, how can they do this and we can't? Well, because many of them come from, as you just very aptly said, ancient cultures. And they are able to interact with each other. They are able to support each other. They are able to bind and commune around the commonalities of the cultures from whence they've come. We struggle desperately. We struggle mightily to do that. So you're right. We are an ancient people. We've never been annihilated. Got that. But that doesn't mean we can't be. Just because we haven't been doesn't mean we can't be. Hence, that's where the struggle continues. We have ignorant of the you're right, Peggy. We are ignorant of the truth. We are ignorant of the truth. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this today. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this today, because this is some truth. Tomorrow we're going to celebrate a holiday. And as people of color, we have to ask ourselves, what are we celebrating? Why are we celebrating it? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for us? And to that point, many of us want to wrap ourselves in this flag. I'm an American. Well, I understand what's stamped on your passport, if you have one. I understand what's stamped on your passport. I understand nation of origin. I got that. But does that passport make you an American? Are you able to enjoy the rights that are guaranteed in that Constitution? And if you say you are, then I have to ask, well, then why are so many of us concerned about what could happen to us if Donald Trump's efforts to undo due process, how that's going to manifest itself in our communities? If we're Americans, why are we concerned about being shipped down to that Gator Alley facility that just opened yesterday or Tuesday? Why are we concerned not about being deported? Why are we concerned about being exiled without due process to that prison in El Salvador? What did Donald Trump mean when he said to the president of El Salvador? What did he mean when he said, you know, we might send some of our unwanteds down here? Who was he talking about? The kids that look like Barron Trump? The kids that look like Don Jr.? Or the kids that look like me, mine, and yours? Just asking. Just Dr. Nick, just because you're naturalized doesn't mean you're American. Well, that's an interesting point. It means you're a citizen. But again, Dr. Nick, what does that mean? You're absolutely right. Glenn Austin, American patriotism is spiritual idolatry. If you could, Glenn, elaborate on that a little bit. Elaborate on that, if you could, for me a little bit, Glenn. Glenn, Pookie, and Ray Ray. Hey, Glenn, don't forget Lil Man. Don't forget Lil Man on that. So let me go back to Frederick Douglass. He says, fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? That's a great point. And that's to a great degree what we were just discussing as it relates to nationalization and what it means to be an American. Are the great principles of political freedom, if we as a Black community are able to enjoy those great principles of political freedom, why are we so concerned every election cycle about voter disenfranchisement? Why do voting machines show up in our neighborhoods already loaded with votes? If we are beneficiaries of the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice, was George Floyd allowed the great principles of natural justice? I don't think so. And of course, I could, as Gil Scott-Heron would say, it's an endless list that won't be missed. I could go through the list of names. He says, and am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar? Oppression makes a wise man mad, Douglass says. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became resistive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Are we mad? Are we mad enough as victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in the colonial capacity? With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Where are we in that process as a Black community? Right now, I think in too many instances, we're turning that anger inward. We, in too many of our own communities, are decimating our own communities. We're turning our ire, we're turning our anger on ourselves. And that's not unique to us. Please understand this point, because this is very, very clear. There is nothing inherent in us. There is nothing innate in us, as they love to talk about Black on Black crime. When you look at someone such as Bernie Madoff, who were most of Bernie Madoff's victims of his thievery? They were Jews. He preyed upon his own people, because that's what predators do. They prey upon those that are closest around them. There's nothing inherent in us. There's nothing about the melanin in our skin that makes us more dangerous to those around us than others. When you look at the history of the mafia, who were a lot of the victims of the mafia? They were other Italians that didn't fall in line to that thing of theirs, La Cosa Nostra. There were those outside that did not fall in line. There were those inside that didn't go along with the plan. And they wound up getting whacked. So we have, in many instances, been led to believe that because of the way that a lot of this is portrayed on the news, and again, they love to use that term Black on Black crime. But look at you can look at the Russian mafia. You can look at the Jewish mafia. You can look at the Italian. They prey upon their own. You tend to commit crime. Your victims of crime tend to be those that are closest to you, is the point. So let me continue. Again, oppression makes a wise man mad. See, we have to understand Frederick Douglass was a revolutionary. And one of the things you take away from this phenomenal speech is he talks about resistance. And he's saying to the audience, if a revolution was good enough for your fathers as wise men, then it should be good enough for us as well, because oppression makes a wise man mad. Understand, he didn't say oppression makes men mad, or he didn't say oppression makes people angry. He said oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under this treatment. Why shouldn't we? They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, as are we. Wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. Because earlier on in the speech, he talks about the tensions between the colonies and the crown, and that the crown, England, was putting too much pressure on the colonies, so much so that the colonists got tired of getting squeezed. And as a result of their getting squeezed, he goes on to say, they were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew the limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled, quote unquote, that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were, quote, final, end quote, not slavery and oppression. He's talking about revolution. He's talking about resistance to oppression. I'm going to read that again. They were peacemen, as was Dr. King, as was Malcolm. But they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. What did that brilliant African-American philosopher James Brown tell us? I'd rather die on my feet than to keep living on my knees. What to the slave is the 4th of July? They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but that they knew its limits. I will only take this for so long. It's getting kind of hectic. It's getting kind of hectic. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. Folks, I wish more members of the Congressional Black Caucus understood the significance and the power of that paragraph. I wish the NAACP understood the power of that paragraph. I wish more of us in the South Side of Chicago, in Red Hook, in New York, understood the power of that paragraph. I really do. Because we've been convinced that ours will come by and by. The Dub, thank you for that $9.99 super sticker. Greatly, greatly appreciated. It's a powerful paragraph. That's an incredibly powerful paragraph. They were peacemen. And see, do this if you can. I want you all to do this. I want you all to close your eyes. I want you all to close your eyes. I want you to visualize, if you can, this beautiful brother standing at a podium on the 5th of July in New York, in 1852, 173 years ago. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to visualize this brother standing before a packed house of mostly white people. And he says to them, he's talking to them about their fathers as wise men. And he says, your fathers were men of peace, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. And he's a guy that's already said at the top of the speech, I came out of bondage. And 4 million of my brothers and sisters are still in bondage. That's what he's saying to them. He's saying, your fathers were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. While 4 million of my brothers and sisters are right now oppressed. They showed forbearance, they showed restraint. But he's talking about their white fathers. But they knew the limits of forbearance and restraint as 4 million of my relatives, my brothers and sisters remain in bondage. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. As he's saying to this group of white people, my people are being terrorized by your fathers. And nothing is settled that is not right, saying it ain't over till it's over. Imagine the courage it took for him to stand in that space and deliver that message. And we want to applaud, what's his name, from New Jersey, Cory Booker, who stood in the well of the Senate for 25 hours talking and didn't say a damn thing. Didn't mention Gaza not one time. I mean, I ain't hating. That's just a fact. Now listen to this. Douglass says, would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is that a question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice? Hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have a natural right to freedom? Speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively, to do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. And then he delivers this line that is so simple, but I think is so brilliant. And Amiri Baraka used to say this to me all the time. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. There is not a man standing beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. If we put that in a modern context, we could say there is not a group of people. There is not a culture of people that does not know that genocide is wrong for them. As Gregory Meeks and Hakeem Jeffries and Kamala Harris and the rest of that crew back genocide in Gaza, back the assassination of General Traoré in Burkina Faso, continually try to overthrow the democratically elected Maduro government in Venezuela. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. He then says, Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. This is 1852. A black man, Frederick Douglass. Your boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation, as embodied in the two great political parties, is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty. Oh, we're always running around the world in the name of democracy, overthrowing governments and subjecting people to tyrannical rulers. Look at the Shah of Iran. We're having this conflict with Iran right now because the United States in 1953 overthrew the democratically elected government in Iran, creating a power vacuum, and installed the Shah. And here we are in 2025, after in 1979, the Iranians got sick of oppression and overthrew the dude and threw him out the country. And now we're scratching our heads, sitting here confused and befuddled, saying that Iranians are evil and you can't trust them. Why? Because they won't submit to our oppression. You boast of your love of liberty. In 2014, the United States went into Ukraine and overthrew the democratically elected Yanukovych government in Ukraine and claimed to be defending democracy. And we are here in 2025 engaged in an all-out war in Ukraine because the United States went in and overthrew the democratically elected government in Ukraine. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity. Your pure Christianity. As the Zionist Christians are backing the genocide in Gaza. And the United States ambassador to Israel, what's his name? His daughter is the governor of Arkansas. You know what I'm talking about. That so-called Christian is backing genocide. Why? Because in his misguided Mike Huckabee, thank you very much, Dr. Nick. Mike Huckabee. See, Frederick Douglass wrote this in 1852, 173 years ago. And as clear as the nose on your face, Mike Huckabee is backing genocide because he thinks this will bring about the rapture. He calls himself a Christian. Back in mass murder. Really? Look, I spent 12 years in Catholic school, sentenced to do 1 to 12, did all 12, no probation, no parole. That doesn't, I was an altar boy. I can damn near perform a mass by myself because I know the liturgy by heart. Spent a lot of time in there. Never heard of anything that would validate the utter racist, white supremacist foolishness that Mike Huckabee. No, Dick. No, Dr. Nick, not in Latin. No, not in Latin. I'm not that old. As old as I look, Dr. Nick, they had started performing mass in English by the time I became an altar boy. Good question. That's funny. Confused myself. Oh, never heard. I could never find any rationale for this so-called Christian Zionism. It is white supremacy, masked or cloaked in the costume of religion, just as Zionism is white supremacy cloaked in the costume of Judaism. Monroe Abram, on that note of Catholic school Catholicism can relate women, came from the same cloth on that one. Oh, hey man, a lot of us, Monroe, a lot of us. And with your name of Monroe Abram, are you from Louisiana? I bet you are. Ooh, child, don't you know? Good old prosperity gospel. Oh man, don't get me started on that one. Please. Don't get me started on that one. So again, Americans, your Republican politics, small r, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican, small r, religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. They were inconsistent then, and they're inconsistent now. Your boast of liberty, your superior civilization, your boast of liberty, while you try to overthrow the democratically elected government in Venezuela. Right now, Donald Trump is trying to tighten the screws on Cuba because they won't acquiesce to oppression. While the whole political power of the nation, as embodied in the two great political parties, is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 millions of your countrymen. Here he's talking about the two great political parties pledged to support and perpetuate the same colonial, imperialist, racist mindset. They were doing it then, and they're doing it now. It's the same. What do we say now? Two wings on the same bird. Right? That's what we hear ad nauseum now. And it's right, because they're paid by the same benefactors. So what you get are variations on the same thing. Now I'm going to give you one final quote from a different speech, but it's Frederick Douglass. Because many of you, I believe, have heard the first two sentences of this, but you haven't heard the whole context. Quote, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. This is 2 years after the what to the slave is the 4th of July. I'm sure many of you have heard, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And that's true. And that's powerful. But what comes after that? Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. Frederick Douglass was a revolutionary. And there are so many others. Fred Hampton, when you read some of Fred Hampton's speeches, they're coming directly from Frederick Douglass. When you read Letter from Birmingham Jail by Dr. King, you hear Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or both. And so many of you, the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. And many of you all will ask, Wilmer, what are we to do? It's right there. That's why I tell you to read. He just told you what to do. He told you what to do in 1853. He told you what to do in 1855. You just got to read it and then act upon it. Vincent Robinson, thank you for that $10 super sticker. The United States also supported every president of South Vietnam. All were corrupt dictators. I am not that well versed in the history of South Vietnam, but I know that the United States supported a lot of the presidents. So Zhao Yun, you didn't hear him in 18, what? You didn't hear him in 1855. Well, you're hearing it now. Read it. That's why I assigned it to you all yesterday. Zhao Yun, did you read it yesterday when I assigned it to you? I didn't hear him either, but I read it. So what's your point? So, folks, tomorrow is the 4th of July. A lot of ribs, a lot of brew, a lot of liquor, a lot of potato salad, all of which is wonderful. But if you can, take a moment. Take a moment. I'm not saying read the whole speech because it's 14 pages if you print it out. It's long. But at least give some recognition. You know, I wish we could get as excited about this speech on the 4th of July that was given on the 5th of July. I wish we could get as excited and dance around and have all the parties and all the as we do about Juneteenth. I wish we could bring as much glee and honor and appreciation. That's the word, appreciation. I wish we could bring as much appreciation to Frederick Douglass on the 4th of July as we do around Juneteenth. So tomorrow night, as you're standing out there with the sparklers and all of the other fireworks, if they're legal where you live, read a little bit of this. After you bless the food, read a little bit of this. Just a couple paragraphs. At the family reunion, read a little bit of this. As we sit down and ponder, what are we to do? You've been told what to do. Just read it. Fannie Lou Hamer had the same sentiment as Frederick Douglass when she said, "The flag is drenched with our blood. It's not for us." So say Peggy Parks Miller, a member of the Connecting the Dots Club. So with that, let me thank me for joining me today. Thank you all so much for listening to my rant to the today's Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. I have reached out to, hang on, let me see if he responded, to tell you who's going to be with us on Monday, who I hope will be with us on Monday. Give me 1 second here. Oh, shoot. I hate it when my screen does that. Yes, there we go. Professor Richard Wolff is going to join us on Monday. We're going to talk about this big, ugly bill that just got passed. Professor Richard Wolff is going to join us on Monday. And so follow us and subscribe, folks. Those of you that have yet to click that link, click it, please. You will help us tremendously. We're, are we over 8,000? Let me see here. Bear with me. Help me out, Melody. Okay. Tomorrow, we're going to re-air an interview with Caleb Maupin. And those are always phenomenal. We're going to re-air an interview with Caleb Maupin tomorrow. Again, Dr. Richard Wolff. He's asking the question, is that Caleb that's doing that in the interview tomorrow? Melody? He's at his asking the question. Yes. Okay. So tomorrow, Caleb Maupin is going to be asking the question, is America really free? Great question on the 4th of July. And we're over 8,000, trying to get to 10, and we can only do it without y'all. So please help us out. Great traction. I mean, I think we're ahead of the curve, and we need to stay there. So this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because it's rhetoric-free podcasting. See y'all Monday with Dr. Richard Wolff. Until then, I am Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful remainder of your day. Have a very positive and blessed holiday. Read this speech. Talk about it. As my father would say, you might mess around and learn something. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.